Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. Today is Thursday, March 3rd. I am Charlene O'Hanlon and counting down 2 weeks until St. Patrick's Day, guys. Yes, we've got a great Techstrong TV broadcast for you today. As always, we're going to get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Stephen Cavey, who is the co-founder and chief evangelist over at Ground Labs. They talk about 5G and security. We've been talking about 5G for quite a while now and eagerly awaiting its ubiquity. But there are certainly some cybersecurity issues surrounding 5G. So Stephen and Alan talk about some of those and what organizations can do to protect themselves. It's a really fascinating conversation. After that, Alan speaks with Vadim Ojevetsky, who is the co-founder and Chief Experience Officer over at Imply.io. They are chatting about updates to what's Imply is doing with a project Shapeshift, which is, they just reached milestone 1, which includes the launch of a new product and cloud service, as well as a private preview of a major architectural expansion of Apache Druid. So for those of you who don't know what Project Shapeshift is, it is a 12-month initiative to tackle the most pressing issues that developers face when building modern analytics applications, which is kind of interesting. They're actually doing it through a series of new technologies and methodologies. So this is an update on what's going on with that. It's a great conversation as well. After that, we have a very short Haunted Hacker podcast for you. This one is only about 40 minutes long. In this one, host Mike Jones is speaking with Fabrizio Di Carlo, who is the head of product and infrastructure security over at ScoutBee. And they discuss Fabrizio's journey through into cybersecurity. Plus, they talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Really, who's not these days in security, as well as the OWASP Top 10 reports, ransomware, and so many other things during this short presentation or discussion. So check it out. It's always a good time over at the Haunted Hacker. After that, we have our Something Old segment, which is from the recent Predict 2022 event. This one is a keynote address, I believe. It's called The Future of Observability, and it features Mitch Ashley from Techstrong Research, Lodvik Bogards, who is from Stack State, Brian Dawson from Dawson & Dawson, Inc., and Cyril Leclerc from Elastic. And they have a very spirited panel discussion about observability, what it means in 2022, what are some of the drivers that are creating the need for observability, and what steps organizations can take here in 2022 to reach their observability goals. And so much more is discussed in this panel. It's really, really worth checking out. So highly encourage you to stick around for that one. All right, and then I have the news headlines for you, and then I have a great conversation with Liliana Monge, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sabio Coding Bootcamp. Sabio is a bootcamp that is geared toward female coders, and so she and I discuss ways that they're working to close the diversity gap in careers in technology. So not just application development, but other areas as well. Just even learning to code can be a beneficial skill for pretty much anybody, and she really does like to focus on making sure that there is gender equity and parity. So it's a great conversation she and I have. After that, I've got the webinars preview for you, and then we close things out with the View with Vizard. In this conversation, Mike Vizard speaks with Kubler CTO Oleg Chernikin, who is debunking the top 3 myths surrounding Kubernetes. It's a great conversation there. All right, we've got a fantastic lineup for you today, and we're actually going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, we are back, kicking off today's Techstrong TV broadcast. We've got a conversation between Alan and Stephen Cavey, who is the co-founder and chief evangelist over at Ground Labs. They're having a great conversation about 5G and security. This is a very relevant topic. A lot of organizations are looking into 5G now that it's actually a thing, but there are certainly some cybersecurity concerns surrounding that. So this is a great conversation, especially if your organization is considering making the move to 5G. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. My guest for this segment is Steve Cavey. Steve is with Ground Labs. Hey Steve, welcome back to Techstrong TV.
Alan, it's a real pleasure to be with you here again. It was, April 2020, just as the world was going a bit crazy when we last spoke.
Was it that long? My God.
It was.
Yeah, and here we are, hopefully, just when the world is, well, I don't want to say the world's returning to sanity with everything going on in Europe and everywhere else, but...
I am an optimist, though. I mean, think about, there was just so many unknowns that particular month. And, I think now we've got a lot more airplanes back in the sky. We've got people moving around again. We've got people getting back into the office. I think there is a lot to be positive about. There's always going to be something to not be positive about.
There's always stuff going on in the world.
There is.
Yes, there is. Steve, for folks who aren't familiar with Ground Labs, why don't you just, I don't want to take a lot of time if it's okay, but and I don't want to shortcut you either, but give people a little Ground Labs background if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So Ground Labs has been around for 15 years. The reason why we exist is because of the issue around companies not understanding where their data is. You look at a lot of the data breaches that happen, and very often the data that's been stolen is data that the organization never knew that they were even storing in the first place. So we help companies scan across all of their storage, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, whether it's the endpoint on the server, and all of the strange and wonderful and hidden places where data tends to end up. And we give them a full picture of all the personal, the PI, the sensitive data that's hiding from over 50 different countries, over 300 types of personal data that we can find. And we lay it all out in a single pane of glass. And then we can help you make some risk-based decisions. We can help you do some remediation, cleaning that data up, encrypting it, deleting it, masking it, doing a few other things. And we can also help you spread the responsibility of this cleanup work across into the organization, rather than the IT guys or the security team feeling like they're the ones that have to go to all that effort to clean up the mess that frankly weren't the people that created that mess in the first place. So it makes sense to put it back onto the people who did create that mess. And I guess that in a nutshell sums up, we provide the truth of what's really happening when it comes to the handling and storage of sensitive data across your organization.
Very cool. We provide the truth. If you leave it right there, that's good. Hey, Stephen, you know what? I didn't even mention your title, of course, with the company. Why don't you talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm one of the co-founders and chief evangelist here at Ground Labs. Before this, I was in network security. I've got a background stemming all the way back to the ISP days of the 1990s. That was where I cut my teeth on learning networking. And that went through the whole e-commerce boom that we saw through the 2000s. And I strangely ended up in payments as a natural progression of all of that. And that's where I really became exposed to the security issues that were evolving in the world, and then the layering on of all these new compliance standards and regulations that had to come about because, frankly, businesses weren't doing the best thing when it came to data and how data was being secured. And so I kind of became immersed in that. And that's where Ground Labs spawned out of, is this thing that we saw where data was being stored everywhere. And it was just being freely exchanged and handled and emailed and all sorts of other, from a security standpoint, absolutely atrocious things. But organizations didn't have the tools to find that data and lock it down and do the right thing with it. So Ground Labs was born out of trying to make that process simple, and some of our biggest fans in the world ended up being the security auditors, the assessors. And so, I guess my background coming from networking, going into payments and then through to security and compliance kind of fits in well with what we do today.
Absolutely. It's funny listening to you. We spoke briefly off camera, but my background also started back in the heady days of the commercial internet coming to life in the 90s. For me, out on Long Island, and I thought I was a virtual landlord selling virtual real estate on Sun machines back then, and hooking everyone up to that same T1 line that we charged the same price for, even though there was only I think one T1 line. Actually, there was a time when we got to the T3 and we thought, oh my God, and yeah,
we
started the same way. Yeah.
And then I also went to payments, because the whole e-commerce thing, and then
got involved in e-payments, and of course cybersecurity as well, and then PCI and that whole thing. But I look at the speeds and feeds back then, because it was more, I was doing hosting more than pure ISP, and it was all speeds, feeds, and bits and bytes, right? And now you look at just speeds, feeds over your phone, and we're setting up. We just expanded the office, so we had to rejig the network and WAN and LAN and all that. And, we're on the verge of another, I think, generational change in bandwidth and in our ability to utilize ever increasing amounts, because there's some sort of Moore's law here, where the more bandwidth you have available, the more ways we find to fill it up.
Yeah.
Right. And 5G and all that represents. I mean, it's kind of like wireless Ethernet, or more. At these levels. Of course, like everything else on the internet, it's why we can't have nice things. It presents its own security challenge.
Yeah, you got me thinking there, Alan, because I often do think about, what if I could take my phone back in time to those days? I could run the entire ISP off what our phone can do today, and the overall bandwidth capability would be several hundred times faster than what we were paying and what we had access to, in the form of a T1 line, or what, in Australia we called it an ISDN line. 128 kilobits, it did 16 kilobytes a second. That means that 1 megabyte would take more than a few seconds, and that was the norm. And when you were a user at home, you were downloading at 3 to 4 kilobytes a second. That was the absolute max that a modem dialing over an old analog phone line could do.
Fine. Yep.
And everybody accepted it because that was the technology back then. And now, even before we think about 5G, the fact that we can download hundreds of megabytes in no time at all. And, I think this whole work from home revolution wouldn't have been as possible 10 years ago as it was instantly, in the last 2 years, because of the speeds that we have access to. I remember trying to work from home in the early 2000s, and the speed was a huge barrier to productivity, having to wait for things to come down before you could work on them. And now it's instantaneous. And so I think the fact that when we've got people working from home, and it's like we are all sitting on the same local area network, is a real enabler. And I think what makes it very realistic to think about work from home as really not that different from the work from the office scenario, when you take out the human consideration and the in-person interaction. You put that aside, the technology really gives you no excuses.
Well, there's a chicken and egg piece of this, right? Because what happens is, with that kind of access, or with that kind of bandwidth, the kinds of applications we can run kind of fill the vacuum, right? We couldn't do video. We couldn't do Zoom like this.
No.
Right? Without that kind of bandwidth. I think back, I think the first time I played a video, if you will, on the computer was I think the Jimmy Stewart film, It's a Wonderful Life, the copyrights came off it, and people were putting it out on DVD. Might have been a CD, maybe it wasn't a DVD yet. But anyway, it played on my 486 machine or whatever. And it was a postage stamp size video. If you expanded it, you could to the screen. It was a 14-inch monitor, VGA, maybe it was SVGA. It looked terrible. And that wasn't even online. That was just the internal bus on the computer from a CD player. The first time we started, do you remember the first videos over your phone? They weren't very good.
They weren't very good. I mean, my first experience like that was audio. When actually we started the ISP, but before we onboarded any users, we just remember going, my goodness, this is the most amount of bandwidth we've ever had access to in our life. What can we do with it? And at that time, Sony had some music that you could actually play off their website. And we just remember hearing full stereo audio coming down this 16 kilobyte a second line.
It was wow. Even though it was probably crappy audio, we think of it now.
Yeah, I mean, here's buffering and echo, but it's still.
Remember the Real Video? That was the dominant brand back then, right? Real Video streaming. Right? And what it took to set up a streaming player. Now, I mean, hey, Zoom is a verb.
Right? Let's Zoom.
And I think I'm really excited now about, you mentioned 5G before. I think you talk about where the future is heading. We're in the infancy of the next evolution of connectivity. And I think 5G is a real stepping stone on that. But, obviously I come from a security background, so thinking about that from a security standpoint brings about a whole new raft of issues.
It really does. I don't think it's even a stepping stone. I think it's a gateway to a whole new era, right? I think it's another quantum kind of leap up from where we were before, or, especially when we fully roll out 5G.
Exactly.
But like you said, there's going to be security issues, right? Let's talk about, and we can't anticipate everything, I get it, but, clue people in, Stephen, give them a sense of what some of these issues are.
Yeah, the sorts of issues that I think about when we talk about 5G, first and foremost, let me just state really clearly, using a 5G network isn't going to specifically introduce a new vulnerability on your computer that you've just connected through your phone as a hotspot. That's not what I think about when we talk about security issues. But, in our world, security issues are only increasing, they're not decreasing. We fix one set of problems, one set of vulnerabilities, patch a whole bunch of things, and the bad guys are now trying to break into us with the next set of vulnerabilities that's become available. And that's just going to be a forever cycle that we never completely solve. There will always be a new way to try and break into a system or a network or a device, and keeping ahead of that is going to be the game. And that's why people in security will always be needed. But I think introducing 5G introduces a new set of considerations. It's an exciting technology. It's going to provide a lot more scale in terms of concurrency, in terms of the number of devices that we can have. So that's going to drive a lot more devices to be connected, particularly with the new eSIM technology, where you can have a device that doesn't need a physical SIM card and can just connect to a 5G network in the air and immediately get online, get an IP address, and start communicating on the internet and contacting other hosts. Think about that for a second. We've been talking about IoT for a while now. We've seen some botnet attacks, some denial of service things going on there. Even your average website hosting provider now includes DDoS mitigation because it's a real threat. And this is only going to become more challenging as more devices are just going to be added onto the internet through 5G technology, because suddenly you have more devices that are connected concurrently and have access to far more bandwidth than we've ever had before. So I think that's the second part of the challenge, is the data transfer capabilities. It's both a wonderful thing. The opportunity that comes from that is amazing. The fact that you can do gigabit speed through the air. I mean, I think the theoretical speed of 5G is 20 gigabits. I mean, that's insane. I just did a speed test today. My gigabit connection here at my home office, I'm pulling 900 megabits a second. And, I'm really proud of that. But, I think at the
10 times that.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, maybe, in a practical standpoint, maybe not. But even, right now, I just had a look at the speed reports. I think Korea's pushing the highest 5G throughput at about 500-600 megabits right now. As we said before, we're still in the infancy of where 5G rollouts are at.
So I think that's one thing we should make clear to our audience, especially here in the States. What we're calling 5G, what's being offered right now under the name 5G, is baby steps, right? This is not the full 5G that we may see in
from zero to
a couple of years, right?
No, there's about 95,000 base stations deployed right now globally. I think there's about 1,000 in your neck of the woods there in Florida, assuming that's where you still are at the moment.
Yes,
and so it's. Not everybody is on. Not everybody has an iPhone 13 or a, whatever the latest Android device is. But, it won't be that many years from now where everybody is on 5G by default, just like 4G is now. It's crazy to think that not that long ago to be on 4G was a privilege. I remember
just
2011.
AT&T discontinued 3G. They announced plans to discontinue their 3G network. But here's the other thing that to me is a wild card, and that is when you give innovative people capability like 5G speed throughputs, they are going to innovate, and we're going to see new classes of applications.
Yes.
Right? That kind of take up that vacuum, because nature abhors a vacuum. And these new classes of applications may introduce new security concerns that we have that are different, that aren't the run of the mill, that aren't what we've seen before. Just and it's hard to anticipate the unknown, right? And that, I'm not trying to fearmonger people or scare you away from 5G at all, but I do think that is something security people have to be thinking about. We have to watch what are the applications that this is spawning or enabling.
I think we're going to see an era where we're coming from a time where you need to be strong in your offline capability, and then if connectivity is available, then we go online. And I think we'll see a flip on that. It'll be online by default for almost everything that we do, and offline will be rarely used, if available at all. It'll be really strange to not be connected through some form as this sort of connectivity becomes completely ubiquitous. And particularly with, as I said, eSIMs before, and the fact that we can probably move between networks as well. So if one network's down, no problems as a cooperative with another network to get online through those guys. So I think we'll see all sorts of interesting things there. But, back to the security issue, I think about it in terms of what are the real threats that businesses need to think about. And the way I imagine this, particularly, again, over the last 2 years, we've gone to a very high level of remote work, more than we've ever done before. And remote work means so many different things now. It means a little bit like me sitting in the home office on a fiber broadband connection that's terrestrial. But a lot more people are now, I just had a video call this afternoon with someone actually not too far from you. And I could clearly see in the background, he was sitting on the edge of water with a few palm trees around, just having a video call outside. And that, I think that capability and that possibility will be far more normal with 5G. You'll be able to do anything. You will not have any perceived barriers about being able to hold a video call or not hold a video call, whether you're in a physical property with a terrestrial line or you're out and about with a 5G connection. But from a business threat standpoint, I think what this really does is wakes everybody up to the idea that your remote workers are going to be connected to very high speeds all the time, even when they're out and about roaming on a mobile. And so I think from an attack threat vector point of view, previously the attack threat vectors were more focused on devices that were well connected, responded really quickly. They're sort of the top of the pecking order in terms of the more likely type of device that you would want to compromise if you were a criminal looking to assemble a botnet or looking to do data exfiltration of any decent volume. Then it works in your favor to focus on devices that have really good connectivity, and the devices that have really poor connectivity, you would only attack those in certain circumstances if you knew it was a right target or it was a targeted attack. We're entering an era where every device almost is going to have very good connectivity. And so that means that if you're looking to achieve data exfiltration, you're looking to deploy malware that starts communicating things between other instances of malware or back to collector points, that all just became a lot more advantageous to the attacker. And so from a business standpoint, I think the real threat is coming from my background of data, data and security, the amount of data that's ending out on the desktop now, out on the endpoint, is far more than businesses realize. I think about the typical organization that comes to us and they want to talk to us about where is their data. They're worried about suffering a data breach. They're worried that they're storing data that they don't know about. But what they're worried about usually when they're talking to us is, we think we've got an issue with our databases. We think we've got an issue with our big data repository or our data lake, all these really large repositories, or they're concerned about the cloud. They've got all these buckets in the cloud. It's storing all this data. They want to know what's in there. And they're not very often bringing up the topic of what's out on the endpoint. And that is the treasure trove, because all of the employees that are syncing data from cloud sources, from on-prem data storage repositories, and bringing them onto the laptop, opening them up in applications, whether it's Excel, whether it's Word, and so on, we're building up a real cache of sensitive data, PI data, people's information, customers' information, employees' information. And then we're connecting these devices now to much faster networks. And so I think the risk of data exfiltration just went up. And I guess just a really quick, simple example is there's been a lot of talk lately about a particular Swiss bank that suffered a data breach not that long ago.
Yes, there has.
There has. And what I find really fascinating about the talk and the chatter out there regarding this data breach isn't the fact that the data breach happened to a bank. It's everyone's focused on what was in the data that was stolen. And then now they're naming and shaming the bank, saying, well, you've been dealing with these customers and these nefarious organizations. And, it's become more of a social justice campaign. And we're completely glazing over the fact that a bank suffered a data breach, and it was an insider attack. Someone on the inside took that data and then gave it to a news agency.
Well, we're desensitized to this. When you have news of breaches and even of financial institutions becoming commonplace as they are, there's only so. It's kind of like when I do these interviews and companies, announce another $100 million round and they're now a unicorn. Right? There was a handful. Now there's thousands or hundreds, if not thousands. But, it's a desensitization issue. And it's true. We need to, it's true, but here's the other piece of it. You know what, Steve? We're from the initial internet generation, right? You and I both around when the internet starts becoming commercial. People who are internet natives, who grew up with the internet and the net always being around, they don't have the same, for the most part, they don't have the same sense of privacy.
Yeah.
They don't have the same sense of, this is not for public consumption, right? I keep it behind here.
Yep. No,
And so I don't know if they get quite as upset about it.
I definitely, we just did a survey recently, and number one, we surveyed about 1,000 consumers just to get a quick sentiment of what the average thinking on this was. And I think it was 71% of them weren't actually very aware of the fact that there were laws out there designed to try and protect them. That was really
crazy, right?
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. I found that part really interesting.
Are we making much ado about nothing? I often wonder,
are we fighting these?
Yeah,
you're fighting these fights, and if the people don't appreciate it, what's anyway? Stephen, we are way over time, man. We were supposed to go 15 minutes. We're 25.
Good conversation.
Yeah, it was a good conversation, though. Hey, don't wait 2 years and another pandemic to pass to come back on, though, okay?
I'll be happy to, man. Alan.
All right, it's good seeing you. Best of luck. Keep us posted with Ground Labs, and we'll talk to you soon.
Always a pleasure, Alan. Thank you again.
All right, Steve Cavey from Ground Labs here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got a conversation between Alan and Vadim Ojevetsky, who is the co-founder and chief experience officer over at Imply. Imply is here with Alan to talk about Project Shapeshift, which is something that the company organized last year. And it's a 12-month initiative to tackle some of the most pressing issues that developers are facing when they are building modern analytics applications. So Vadim offers up a milestone progress report on what's happening with Project Shapeshift. We'll also talk about what's going on with the expansion of Apache Druid. The Druid experience is something that Imply has been working on as well, specifically in the areas of cloud native simplicity and completeness. So Druid is it's an open source technology, and Imply has been obviously putting a lot of effort into it. So let's go ahead and roll the conversation now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. I have a new company with it's not a new open source project, it's actually a very popular open source project, but one that we've never covered here on Techstrong TV. Let me introduce you to Vadim Ojevetsky. Am I close, Vadim?
Close enough.
Okay, well say it right anyway though, because someone from your family's listening, They want to hear it.
Hi everybody. My name is Vadim Ojevetsky, and I'm a co-founder here at Imply.
Yes. So Vadim, we're going to get into Imply in just a second, but it's hard to tell the Imply story without talking a little bit about Apache Druid. And if you don't mind, I wanted to start there. You were
absolutely.
You were very involved in founding this project. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. So before me and my co-founders founded Imply, we were working all in a company that was building an analytics product for the ad tech market. And when I say an analytics product, that's really something that takes a lot of data and can answer questions like, who are my top publishers? What are the biggest campaigns that are trending right now? Which campaigns have suddenly maybe lost their steam and we need to dive in and investigate those campaigns? And we were building this application something that you can provide to the users of, like to the publishers. You give it out to the actual people that are using these apps. And we really stumbled upon a problem that we couldn't find a tool, a database that would be able to power, to be able to consume that much data and at the same time answer those questions in a way that can provide an interactive experience to people. And that was kind of like our aha moment, where we basically said, wow, there's nothing that could solve that for us without bankrupting the company, because all the things that were available at the time were from very expensive proprietary vendors. So we started building a new database, which, looking back on it sounds a little bit crazy, but we released it in the open source and it took off. It was really cool. We built our app on top of it. And once we open sourced the project, we also saw a lot of other people come in and start building other apps on top of it. As I said, we were kind of building an analytics application for the advertising market, but we saw other companies pick it up and start using it for things we never even envisioned it for originally. Notably, Netflix picked it up and started using it for all of their user-facing analytics. So any interaction that you do on the Netflix site, their product managers, their engineers, when they want to understand how people are engaging with their site, they're looking at an application that's powered by our database. We saw people starting to pick it up in supply chain monitoring, InfoSec, network monitoring, really, you name it. And we just saw that there is this broad market for applications that are interactive, that are delivered to the end user, that need to support high concurrency. And we decided to make a company around that.
Sure. So, Vadim, give me a time frame. When did, and by the way, this database we're talking about became Apache Druid.
Exactly.
Is the Apache Druid. When was this that you and your partner or co-founder kind of said, hey, we got to build something?
We're coming up on 10 years of open sourcing Apache Druid, which has been quite a journey and it's been very exciting.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Right, because there are a lot of open source databases that are very scalable, and in today's world we see graph databases and time series databases, and of course there's NoSQL and SQL and so many different things. But I want our audience to recognize that this was 10 years ago. A lot of the stuff that you see people playing with now wasn't even in existence then. So, and why did you build it from scratch? Because had you had the foresight to say, okay, we'll wait 10 years, maybe something else or someone else will do it, you don't have that luxury, right?
And we were, as I said, we were working with the advertising industry. And I think in many ways with digital advertising, they were kind of ahead of the curve on just the scale of data that they need to analyze. Yeah. Now, hearing companies suggest that they have a lot of data, that they want to offer analytics to their customers, that's really, that's here and now. That's the reality of the industry. But 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. And I think we happen to be lucky to be in a place of the industry where it was kind of like pushing ahead of the rest.
Fair. And just, to give him his due, your co-founder also is the person who also helped you found what became Druid. His or her name is?
My two co-founders are Fanjin Yang and Gian Marlino, and we all work together on Druid from day one.
Got it. Okay, so now let's fast forward. You guys decide, okay, you got Druid. A lot of people pick up it. It becomes part of the Apache Foundation, which is kind of a really big stamp of approval and gives it a lot of legitimacy in the eyes of our audience, in the eyes of the developer community. When did you guys decide to do a commercial company around it?
Yeah, well, when we open sourced Druid, and we saw it being picked up by companies outside of the industry we were kind of originally developing it for, which was advertising analytics. When we saw people say, well, this analytic use case, this pattern that you're solving, this applies to my industry as well. And this is one of the awesome powers of open source, because we were just a couple of engineers working in a company. We didn't have the budget or time to do market research on the applicability of these techniques. But the market kind of did its research for us and kind of came to us by actually setting up and utilizing this technology. And before we know it, we were going all around Silicon Valley, kind of giving tech talks about Druid and helping people set it up in their clusters, in their data centers. And we were very excited about the project. We wanted to build a company that could both nurture Druid and help it grow and develop into a more mature project, and also offer true value add on top of it. And we've been doing that ever since.
Excellent. Okay, and the name, I just want to make sure we get it all for our audience so we don't lose them for deep. The name of the company that you and your co-founder started is Imply, yeah?
Imply, yeah.
And the website?
We're not Druid company. The Druid trademark is owned by Apache Foundation, and we love them for that. We are Imply Data, and we provide a whole suite of things to make building applications on top of Druid just as simple as possible.
Excellent. The website for Implied Data?
Sorry, come again?
The website for Implied Data?
Imply.io.
Imply.io. So that's, spell it, IMPL.
No,
I know .io. That we're familiar with. But how do you spell Imply?
IMPLY.io.
Right. Okay. People got it. I'm sorry, Vadim. Sometimes it's basic block and tackling here until we
make sure, because I want to make sure people are able to go check it out. All right. So now we have Imply.io. You make it easy for people to build applications on top of the Druid database. Yes.
Yeah. And now we're kind of taking it to the next level. So we've always kind of added value with UIs, monitoring tools, deployment infrastructure. And now we're announcing Imply Polaris, which is a SaaS offering of Druid. It's not just Druid in a cloud. It integrates so much more, including all the monitoring that you need and push-based streaming ingestion by our partnership with Confluent Cloud.
Got it. So it's called Polaris, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, and it really it's sort of it's Druid Plus as a service, right? So you get
Absolutely.
the basic. Obviously, if you have a database, there's everything that exists under the database, the OS, the infrastructure, all that. But then on top of the database, you have some other kind of, I don't know if they're open source or not, but other extensions and capabilities that you don't get just with the vanilla Druid if you were setting it up yourself.
Absolutely. On top of the database, we have a suite of proprietary tooling that kind of comes bundled to you from the get-go when you use Polaris. It includes our data exploratory UI pivot. It includes Clarity, which is a monitoring tool we have specifically designed for Apache Druid, and also all of the deployment and infrastructure is handled for you. It's serverless, so you don't have to think about servers, which is a really neat concept. If you're deploying Druid yourself, as people have been doing up to this point, even if you're using our tooling, you still have to think about like how many servers do I have running, provision new servers. You still talk in that language, and we're kind of moving beyond that now, which is extremely exciting. It's just an API.
So, well, in my mind, though, the question then begs, how do you price this? Because so many of these kinds of things were priced on CPUs, servers, space, etc. How are you pricing Polaris?
We have pretty industry standard competitive pricing that is basically based on a set size that incorporates in it a lot of variables, like the number of users, the amount of data, and it's kind of like a package that you can kind of choose which one you want.
Got it. Good.
I just want to make sure for anyone who wants to go check it out, if they go to imply.io, it's right on the front page there.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So imply.io will take you to wherever you need to go.
Okay. So Vadim, now let's talk give us the kind of use cases for Polaris. I assume company, you tested it, you betaed it, and you've got customers on it. What are some of the use cases people are using it for?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really used when you have some developer, just like us back in the day when we were building out this application that we ended up building Druid as a result. If you have a developer that's tasked with, or an architect that's tasked with creating an analytics application that you can deploy to thousands of people that will consume terabytes, and maybe even petabytes of data, and that needs to be very quick and interactive. The use case is that you can basically point your data stream at Polaris and build your application on top of our analytical APIs. This is the fundamental thing we want to empower. We want to make that journey that we had to undergo. It took us years and years, something that now can be done in days or hours. And in terms of the applicability of this, I literally see no end to where this applies, from advertising, kind of where we started, to supply chain monitoring, network analytics, user behavior monitoring and tracking, fraud detection. Really, I never cease to amaze at how many cool new different use cases people are using the software for.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I mean, look, my experience with open source is once this is out here now, there'll be more use cases, because just like when you guys started Druid itself, you were thinking in terms of advertising and, clicks and so forth. But Netflix uses it for something else, and someone else uses it for something else. And that's just the beauty of that open source model is, it's like giving people clay and they mold it into what they need and what they want.
Absolutely. It's one of the best aspects of this job, to see how people put Druid to creative uses, and it's most exciting, especially when people reach out, and a lot of people kind of don't like to announce themselves until they have something that's ready and good to go. And sometimes we kind of stumble upon people. We have very active community channels. We really engage with the community and we help them out. But sometimes people come to the community channels and they have like a fait accompli, application that they built, and it's very exciting. And oftentimes they have this built out and they're just looking for help monitoring and making sure that they can meet their SLAs, and taking the cost out of deploying it and everything like that. And that's where we step in.
Absolutely. Vadim, this is great. I just want to it's available now. People watching this today can go check it out.
Yep. Yeah.
Is there a free or trial version?
Yes, there is. So if you go to imply.io, there you can check out the trial version. And also to people that are just discovering Druid for the first time, maybe, you can download that straight off the Apache website and play with that as well.
Excellent. Vadim, thanks for coming on the show. We're about out of time, but best of luck with Polaris. And I think it'll be interesting to see how the market, takes Druid as a service, or Druid Plus as a service, if you will. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, Alan.
All right. Vadim Oglivetsky. Better this time?
Yes, nailed it.
All right.
Check out imply.io, imply.io for the Polaris. Druid Plus is a service. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. In this one, Mike Jones, the host, is having a conversation with Fabrizio Di Carlo, who's head of product and infrastructure security at ScoutBee. They discuss so many different things, including Fabrizio's journey into the cybersecurity realm, as well as artificial intelligence, machine learning, OWASP, ransomware, and so many more topics. It's a great conversation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Welcome to the Haunted Hacker podcast number February version 4. This is my 4th episode of this month. And it's kind of crazy because we started out doing 1 episode a month, and then it became 3 or 4 a week, and just insanity. A little bit of news before we get started. I will be speaking in Atlanta, Georgia on the 30th of next month. At the Techstrong event, and we'll be doing some Android hacking with Android emulators, and it'll be a workshop. So it'll be some hands-on, and you'll walk away from that conference knowing how to exploit every Android phone. Other news, of course, the U.S. is standing by watching Russia potentially invade the Ukraine. And once again, the U.S. is sticking their nose where it doesn't belong. And it's all about natural resources, but we'll get into that on another episode, I'm sure. Today we have Fabrizio Di Carlo. I've known Fabrizio for a long time, at least 10 years. And we've kept in contact, and he's a very interesting guy. And I wanted to bring him on the podcast, talk about some things, and catch up. So Fabrizio, thank you for being on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. So it's a pleasure for me as well. How are you, Mike?
I'm not bad, man. It's been a crazy couple of years, I guess. I'm back in the States now, and it's interesting. Just put it that way.
It's a shame we didn't make in London, to be honest. So I really apologize for that. So
yeah, exactly. I've been following your career for quite a while. So why don't you bring us into cybersecurity? What brought you to cybersecurity, and kind of your journey and where you're at now?
Yeah, sure. So what brings me to cybersecurity? Mostly curiosity, actually. Mostly I'm trying to understand how things work and what is behind the things, really. So it's, but you will understand a little bit more with my journey. So I started doing totally different things. I was doing SEO, I was doing user experience, and so on. And then at a certain point, I basically found myself without a job in Italy, because IT in Italy is improving right now, but was not developed at the time. So we're talking about 10 years ago. I think Greg said the same thing last time he was there. So it's so I basically started as an analyst in a security company that right now is not existing anymore, was acquired. And I grew up with my career. So I basically started as a support analyst, doing basically things from little company up to big enterprises. And I was really good at it, actually. And from there I started to explore different areas, like working on malware analysis, doing a little bit of reverse engineering, exploring virtualization and things like that. So I grew up in my career, and then at a certain point I was like, hey, I want to step up in this direction. Is there any possibility? Is there any way that I can grow? Because you didn't recognize my merit. So it was the time it was the ransomware attack, one of, let's say, 2013, 2014. And I came out together with a colleague with a policy to prevent a ransomware attack on the endpoints. And the incident response took the merit of that. And I was like, okay, I'm fine with that, but give me the possibility to grow up. There was no possibility, and so I moved over. I went to the financial industry for a while, and that was really cool, because it was like, oh my God, I was leading from a technical side of small team, so 10 people worldwide, was doing basically exploring different technologies from networking to endpoint to encryption and so on. And they gave me the possibility to grow up, because at the end of the day, I was like, yeah, that's cool, but I want to see the things in a bigger scale. I want to see the patterns. I want to see. I want to do things that prevent, that are proactive. And I realized that the only way to do that was climb the ladder and become an architect. So I became an architect. They gave me this possibility, and it's the best job in the world, man. The best job in the world. And on a serious note, now it's and I'm doing that. So I was doing that for the insurance company. Then I moved over to the German stock exchange. In the German stock exchange, the things became too political.
Right.
And it was the time for me to leave. It was the time that I was not learning anything. It was the time that my manager sent me a message like, we're going to do information security. And I was like, hey, wait a second. My title is Information Security Architect. We report to the team that is called Group Information Security, and you are not telling me that we're going to do IT security. So,
scary. Wrong. That's very scary.
Something is wrong. So it was for me the time to leave. I got few offers, some as a CISO, but I wasn't ready for that position. So I have to self-assess myself. I was like, I'm not ready for a CISO position. And then I joined Greg and few other guys that are really nice in Calbi. So it's and I'm now the head of product and infrastructure security. It's a very fancy title. At the end of the day, I'm doing everything from analyst to engineering to architecture to head of InfoSec type of thing. So I'm sort of wearing different hats every day, and it's fantastic.
I think that wearing different hats every day keeps things interesting because it's never the same, and I really enjoy that too. There's been a lot of companies. I've worked in financial as well. And it was a very interesting environment, very fast-paced environment, because it was one of the largest banks in America. And, it's never dull. It's never a dull moment. But looking back at your career, you're fairly young, and the things that you've done are pretty amazing. And that's I've followed you for a long time because, I have a lot of respect for people like you who come in the industry and just make waves. You don't settle.
Yeah, I started, I think was 14, 15. I started with Linux and playing around, let's say in this way. So now I'm 34, so it's overall, yes, I can complain about my career but I also had a lot of help from the community, so
right.
That's why I also gave back from the community. So I was in the Dublin chapter for OWASP, was one of the board members for OWASP. I mentor a lot of people, or trying to. There were some episodes that were not really the best ones. I think you had similar situation, and so at the same time, I think taking and giving back from the community is what actually help people to grow. I'm one of the examples probably, and I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the key to success is giving back to the community, and the way that I gauge my success in my career is not by what I do and my successes. I gauge my success based on the people that I mentor and the people that I help and their successes. When I help somebody and then I see them later on, they've got like a management position, it makes me feel good because I knew that I gave back to that person and contributed to their advancement. And I think that's what the community is all about. A lot of people lose sight as to, what we're here for. And it's a global issue. Cybersecurity is a global issue, and we're all one family. But I think that people get caught up in the money or the politics, and they lose sight of the fact that we're in it together. And that's what I try to embody in people, is the fact that, yes, we all work for companies, but we're all one family. It's just one big community. And I've seen the best out of the community, and I've seen the worst out of the community. But I think that's with any industry, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So, and as you said, so we are one family, and that's actually what I'm trying to explain every time. So independently, if you are, I don't know, a governance guy or a pen tester or whatever, at the end of the day, we are basically trying to reach the same goal. So it's we can be even in different countries, and this country has a very interesting geopolitical situation. I don't care. So it's that goes over politics.
Yeah. And, I pride myself in the fact that I don't limit myself to a certain country of contacts or even a certain continent. I've got contacts like you in Germany, Hennemeyer from Darktrace, he's in Holland. It's all about, diversity, I think, and not just male and female or race, but countries and regions of the world. I think it's really important that we get those views from everybody to make cybersecurity better. So you're at ScoutBee now, and one of the things that I learned about ScoutBee is that you guys focus a lot on AI and machine learning, and I think it's fucking fantastic. So tell me a little bit about ScoutBee and what you have going on there.
In the meantime, I have this amazing wine, so it's. I know it's a little bit too early in your time zone, but here it's almost 5. So it's.
Hey, it's good enough, man. It's afternoon, right?
Afternoon, yes. Plus today is 16, so it's the International Shiraz Day. So it's nice. One of the startup I have is about wine. So it's I'm a big advocate for wine. But
awesome.
Coming back to your question about ScoutBee. Mm-hmm. Scout-B aims is really trying to become the Google for supplier and for supply chain, but not the one that we are familiar with, but with the physical one. So we have very important customers. So some of them are public on the website, so I can mention them. So like Unilever, like Audi, and few others. And yes, we are pushing for the machine learning. So imagine you are an automotive company. You want to basically to develop a new prototype, and rather than having a supply chain or having your supplier that is giving you a piece in 3 months, we can give you 4 suppliers that will give you the same piece in 3 weeks. And probably even cheaper. So that's what we are aiming to do. We are quite successful. Today is 7 years that we are in the market. There is the birthday going on in Berlin. So it's we are doing fine. We are doing fine. And what we are trying to do also with the information security team is leveraging the Scout-B capabilities for our own purpose. So imagine the situation between Russia and Ukraine, for this situation that is going on. I won't comment on that. I'm a little bit biased on that, so I won't comment.
Me too.
But it's if you're using third-party services like that are based or have some ties with Ukraine, a war or a possible situation, a possible escalation of the things may actually happen, may actually create some disruption. So I was speaking with a colleague in a big financial company, with a former colleague in a big financial company, and they said that they are not capable to understand what kind of suppliers they have ties with Ukraine. They know that they have, there are some, but they are not able to find which one. So we want to leverage this the capabilities of Scout-B also for our internal needs. And I think that's the best use case, for example, that I can think of.
Yeah, and with the pandemic, I mean, we saw the supply chain and transportation and everything kind of affected pretty heavily just because of the pandemic. So having that type of learning as far as supply chain and being able to look at the next best option, I think is really important. So with the artificial intelligence and machine learning, do you guys use like the Bayes algorithm in order to base that machine learning or AI on top of, or how does that work? And you may not be able to talk about it because it may be proprietary, but I thought I'd ask anyways.
Yeah, there are certain things that. Well, first of all, I don't know. I'm not a machine learning expert, and as well. So let me tell you that we are using different models. We are using different machine learning algorithms. Right now, we are in a major rewriting on some of the applications, some of the key applications. So very soon we will have a new infrastructure, new capabilities, and we will be more powerful in that regard, more scalable. I'm happy because I joined in the right time where this transition happening, and I gave my contributes, which is amazing. But as I get, I prefer not entering into detail because everything I'm going to say may be wrong.
Right. So, I've looked at your career and the choices that you've made as far as which company you go to, which industry you go to. And I have to say that you've made some pretty intelligent decisions when it comes to companies. I've looked at some of the companies you've been with and how successful they are and where they're at now. And, hats off and much respect to those decisions. I think that a big part of cybersecurity and people's careers and success in their career has to do with those decisions that they make and when they realize it's time to move on to the next job. And I've done a little bit of analysis, and it looks like people in our industry in cybersecurity usually stay at a job for about 1.5 years until they move on to the next one. I'm guilty of that as well. But I think it's because of the technology advancing so quickly and new technology coming out. I think a lot of us try to stay on top of that. So how do you stay on top of the new technology, maybe some of the new security trends?
Well, about the changes in my career, they were pure luck. So it's.
I don't believe that, but that's okay.
No. It was pure luck. Because, I effectively never paid attention to, I don't know, how critical is supply chain before joining Scout B. I mean, I never considered that. So that's why I said pure luck. But how I keep updated. So I have, of course, my feed and so on, but I think mostly really what is networking again. It is, I try to spend at least 20% of my time in research and development. So right now I'm playing, or I'm trying to explore the world of non-fungible token. I'm really curious about that world and also the possibilities for the future. So I saw one example was one open source company that was giving basically the library to use NFT as a subscription model. And I think that's one of probably the smartest use of NFTs. But other than that, really just chatting with people, going to a conference. I mean, I will speak in few conferences this year, and for me, it's mostly an occasion, first of all, to give back, but also to keep updated. So it's, and I'm lucky enough that I'm reading a lot. So one example about the transition in my job. So it was 2017, and I got a copy of this book called Zero Trust Networks. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, that's a very interesting topic. So it's started to make research. I ended up making my master's degree thesis on it, and in the meantime, I got introduced to John Kinderberg, that is considered the father of Zero Trust. Mm-hmm. And from there, basically, I'm speaking to few conferences around the world about Zero Trust. So it's and of course you keep studying, you keep research. So at the end of the day, it's just reading, keep informed, networking, and everything comes together. So I'm playing a lot with home automation right now, for example. So it's it's a pretty cool thing to keep me updated and not fall into, okay, the most boring side of our job.
Yeah. I think complacency is a big factor in our industry too. A lot of people get complacent and they don't advance with the technology and they get left behind. So I try to encourage people to stay on top of research, do home research. People coming into the industry and, they're new and they don't know all the ins and outs of the industry. I always tell them, learn, never stop learning.
The pandemic was fantastic for that, because a lot of companies gave the material for free, certification for free. I think I got most of the certification, like 10 or 15 during the first year of pandemic. So it's it's pretty cool way to keep updated. So it's just study for the certification. If you don't have the means, do not do certification. It's also a good way. So it's
yeah, absolutely. So I was supposed to speak in Frankfurt at the Cloud Expo in May. Unfortunately, I can't leave the country. But yeah, in Germany, they have a lot of really interesting conferences. I think the Cloud Expo is probably one of the more interesting I've seen. But I think, when we get to a certain level in our career that we have information to share that's valuable, I think it's really important for people to actually get out and speak. And I know that you do a fair share. I was watching a video earlier before we start talking. You were giving an interview about zero trust. And it was a really interesting interview. And zero trust is an interesting topic. I know that that's been, a buzzword in certain circles for a while now. And, there's a lot of topics and trends that are evolving as we speak. And one of them is ransomware. And I know that you've done some malware reversal and some malware analysis. And that's one of my passions as well is reversing malware. So why don't you give us just a brief overview of your view of ransomware and where we're at as an industry and where you think it's going?
So ransomware, unfortunately, is something that is going around for a decade. I mean, it evolved over the time, but it's going around for a decade, and the attackers keep them being very, very proficient in doing that. I mean, right now we are talking about ransomware as a service, and I have to say that the cost is really cheap. You think, why I don't do that? I mean, aside the legal implications, but now, joking aside, I mean, while ransomware attackers are keeping evolving, I noticed, though, that most of the breaches that happen in the ransomware are really, so how the way how ransomware enter into the companies are effective, quite simple. So it's, I mean, we're talking about, I was reading some statistics time ago, and we are talking about 80% of the times is things like Cobalt Strike. Mm-hmm. And we know Cobalt Strike is going around for a while. So just do that, just protect against that. Or other things was like
proxy shell.
Proxy shell, or I don't know, so but very stupid things. So now I don't remember in top of my mind how was the ranking, but and that's why, coming back to your previous question, why I moved to Scoutbeats, why I joined Greg in that. So full disclosure, Greg is my boss. So, but I'm a big fan of him from before he hired me. But I mean, what is let's say his approach to security is really close to mine. So let's focus on fundamentals. Let's focus on protecting the stuff, and then everything that is on top it's basically is amazing, because I see a lot of companies got breached by ransomware that, for example, are certified ISO 27. Fantastic. Yeah, that's okay. Then you ask, okay, what about the asset inventory, or what about, do you have the list of applications? So it's and they don't have that. So it's so I while I think the technologies and also the attackers going are evolving, we are really being regressing, let's say, in this way. We don't think about the fundamentals. We think mostly about certification, most about the new fancy tools with all the likes going on. So
right, yeah, and that, I think that's the biggest problem. So I've done a lot of incident response in the past, I guess, 6 months, and 90% of those incidents I'm researching and analyzing and cleaning up after usually involve something very easy and simple, like patching a pulse secure VPN, just little tiny things that are common sense, but people fail to do them. And that's giving the attackers the opportunity to enter into the network, and next thing you know, have ransomware. So we use the term ransomware as a service, which is very interesting. That whole economic model and that whole environment is really interesting. But now we've seen ransomware as a weapon. Russia using it against the Ukraine and the Ukrainian government. And I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see a lot more critical industries affected by ransomware as a weapon. And that's scary because, if we can't protect on a very basic level the companies that run infrastructure, if we can't patch, if we can't control the security in a small company, how are we going to do it as a country? And I think the Ukraine got the first taste of that as to, the world is not ready for ransomware as a weapon. And that was one of my predictions for this year was I think ransomware is going to evolve into a weaponized digital weapon. And it is going down that path. And I think it's really scary. Just watching what's going on between the Ukraine and Russia, it's a very politicized environment. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of people who are, emotionally tied to it. And I don't mean to, minimize that. I do have family on both sides. So it's a really tricky situation. But I think we're seeing a lot of trends that are starting just in this situation. When you look at the hacktivists to stop the train going to Belarus, when you see, Russia hitting the Ukraine government and the banking systems, locking out banks. I mean, literally yesterday, there were people in Ukraine who couldn't access money because the banks were getting attacked with mad denial of service attacks. So I think as an industry, we're going to start seeing a lot more drastic things happening this year based on geopolitics. What are your thoughts on geopolitics? I mean, you don't have to take a stance either way, but, what do you think about that environment and how we're getting politically involved in cyber attacks?
It's a very good question, a very complex question as well. So let me give you a bit of historical consideration. So, as you said, so one of your prediction was the ransomware as basically as a weapon for a country, but effectively that was not the first case. Think about Stuxnet, where basically Israel and US allegedly attacked Iran. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
There was actually a nice book on this topic. So if you didn't read, I suggest read, or for your followers, I suggest read, which is this How They Tell Me the World Ends, I think was the title. Not so sure, but I can confirm them by a post on LinkedIn. And that actually was very, very detailed on that. So it's I still think was very US centric, but was really detailed on basically on that, on the black market, the exploit market, and things like that. And again, we are talking about let's say. Yes, these exist and all countries are working on that. US is working with NSA, there is North Korea, there is Russia, there is China, of course. So, a lot of countries are working as a cyber weapon. I think Italy as well. Italy has the hacking team back in the time. Now there are a few other companies doing that. So it is scary, actually. It is scary because you really are like, okay, I am a single individual. What can I do if, for example, a country like, that's a good example, because we were talking about that on LinkedIn when we were talking about Dubai and the tower. So it's, if you go to Dubai or to other countries, we have this tower that effectively are probing your phone and infecting. Now, it can be like for national security, but effectively they infected you. So whatever it is, if you're a tourist, it means that they breach your phone and your phone is vulnerable. So how you as an individual can protect that? That's scary, and I deal with that. I'm thinking and deal with that every day of my life, even with my family. So it's quite.
It's a very difficult topic too, because when you look at the countries that are involved, one of my pet peeves, and I don't know why people think this in the U.S. and why they tend to believe this, but a lot of people in the U.S. believe that the U.S. does not get involved in cyber war or cyber attack, and I have to completely set them straight. The fact that we're not unique. We participate just like everybody else. We have to participate. Everybody does, because if you don't, you fall vulnerable to those weapons. The latest one that I took a look at with Jonathan Scott, he does a lot of cell phone hacking and stuff like that. One of the pieces of malware that we looked at was Pegasus from the NSO group. And so I want to say that Pegasus is also what Dubai was using to get into phones. And then you look at Obama when he was in office. He actually infected the prime minister from Germany, I believe. Infected her phone and was eavesdropping on her. It's a global battle, and the thing is, it's been going on for a decade at least, and it's just now coming to mainstream media. And it's funny when I tend to view multiple sources of information, right? So I watch Fox News, I watch CNN, I watch Sky News out of London. I have a Russian news channel, as well as all different channels from like Vietnam and China. And I do that because I want to get a world view of news. I don't want to be fed news. I don't want the government to tell me what they want me to know. And I think that's important. And even in cybersecurity, I think some of the topics that we debate on in cybersecurity, it's important to get multiple views of that data, because it's really easy for one person to take control of that data and tell you what they want you to know. But part of the reason for this podcast is to give a different view of cybersecurity and to be genuine and just kind of translucent and just say, hey, this is what we're seeing and this is a problem. And I think with ransomware, there's so many people who put their head in the sand. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to look at the fact that it's become a political weapon. And we're entering into a really scary new era of cybersecurity, and companies are just not ready for it. And I think that, hopefully we can spread some awareness as far as, the uses of ransomware and why people are not ready. And we saw the first death in the US due to ransomware in a hospital. And I think that's shocking, man. It's really shocking. Like you said, it's scary when you look at your family and you look at where we're going as an industry. It's in ransomware. I think it's going to make some big changes.
Guys, I think I lost you for a minute or so. And now I have wait. Now I have an audio issue.
I can hear you just fine.
Oh yeah. I can hear you right now.
Yeah. So I've never experienced that before, but the entire application just closed, like automatically closed. It was so strange.
Wow.
Yeah.
Someone is ghosting you.
Right.
So I mean, coming back to what you were saying, actually, that's why I think attribution in incident response is one of the most difficult things. I mean, I'm thinking about things some very interesting attack like SolarWinds was last year. So, it was so well architected,
yes,
so well done that you think, I trust the guys that do forensic there, but if someone was capable to do that, how can you be sure that they even didn't modify the artifacts on about SolarWinds? So that's why I have to say that attribution, they have to be done with a little bit of grain of salt, and also taken with a bit of grain of salt, because it is really, I think, was one of the most critical aspects of our profession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just recently, Biden made a statement to Russia that if you attack the infrastructure through cyber means, it's an act of war, and there will be prices to be paid. Whether he will back up that claim or that threat, who knows? But Obama said the same thing. And I think the world is coming to a point where that is considered warfare. And will be responded to with kinetic consequences. Like you look at Hamas and Israel. I just had a retired colonel of the IDF cyber unit on my podcast, and we talked about the whole idea of critical infrastructure being attacked and responded to in a kinetic way. And Israel was actually the very first country to do that. Hamas attacked them through cyber means, and they bombed the shit out of
oh my
Hamas.
God, yeah, I recall that. The video was impressive, yes. I mean, I don't need to, I don't have to laugh, but yes.
Yeah. I mean, they literally tracked down the IP address to one building and just destroyed the whole building. They were like, fuck it, we're done. But I think the world's coming to that point. So you are working for a very good friend of mine, Greg Vandergast. Very, spoken, very vocal about what he believes in. He and I have spoken at many conferences together. We're actually from the same company agency, that our speaking agency. And he's a really great guy. We actually met at Sapphire conference in England, and we were sat at the same table together with the CEO and the former owner of the company. And it was me, him, and Kevin Fielder. We all became really good friends. So I have to say that you're very lucky to have Greg as a CISO. He thinks out of the box, and I think that's really important. You either love him or you hate him. But I think the reason why is because he's so vocal and he doesn't think in traditional ways. And I totally respect that. So, you have a great opportunity with him. I think that's really cool. I'd love to see, the three of us on a conference event sometime and talk about cybersecurity, because I think that between the three of us, the way that we look at things is much different than most people in the industry.
Yeah, so actually you mentioned also Kevin. So it's funny because when I was looking for a job a couple of years ago, I was still in Dublin at the time, and I was reaching out basically all the UK community. So it's I reached Kevin, I reached Greg. No, probably that was a little bit more than 2 years ago, was probably 3. So, but I was mostly looking for mentoring from their side. So again, I got mentoring from Greg in a different way. So it's, but yeah, I have to say, Greg is. It's not easy to work with him. I'm telling him every day. So it's because there is a lot to do, and but at the same time, it's amazing. So yes, I have to say, yes, I feel myself very lucky to have this opportunity. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the European cybersecurity community is really impressive. When I was over there, I just recently came back late last year. And when I was over in the UK, I had to say the people I met were amazing. And everybody's excited about cybersecurity. Here in the US, the industry is very saturated. And it's very, vendor specific, and we don't have quite the community that the UK has. So, in Europe, you guys are very lucky to have that community, that tight knit community where everybody knows everybody by 1 degree of separation. And I think it's really cool.
Yeah, UK and So I traveled for quite some countries. I work in Poland. I work in Italy. I work in Poland, Dublin, and now Germany. So German, I would say there is the more corporate kind of scene and the more underground. So the underground scene, which is really active in Berlin with the CCC and the different camps. Yeah, that's really cool. It's really nice. UK is probably the best mix because you have the corporate, you have the underground. They are all together, which is fantastic. So, and the networking that you can do within the UK community, it's quite amazing. Polish scene is growing, and it's growing fast and great, I have to say. There are a lot of companies really active in either in hiring and conference research. So it's it's really impressive, the thing that there is in all Eastern European parts. So.
Yeah, when I was a kid, one of my first colleagues that I worked closely with maybe some illegal hacking that got me in trouble, was from Poland. And we stayed in contact for a very long time. And the hacking scene in Poland is just absolutely amazing. And, to be honest with you, like the US, we do have an underground scene. It's not what I've seen over in Europe. And I think a lot of it has to do with, like, especially Poland. I think a lot of those circles, when you look at the former Soviet Union before the fall of the Soviet Union, there were a lot of computer scientists who were employed by the government. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, those scientists left because they needed a job and the government was no longer supporting them. And a lot of those guys went to different countries. I think that's why you see a lot of Slavic countries with a lot of hacking groups that are involved. I really enjoyed it there, and it was a great opportunity for me to meet a lot of people. And the technology they have in the UK is just really interesting. Max Hennemeyer, I keep mentioning him from Darktrace. I went to Cambridge to meet with him, and he's a really interesting guy. He was one of the early members of Triple C, the Computer Chaos Club. So it's really cool. Like, there's a lot of history there. So, Fabrizio, it was awesome having you on. I really enjoyed it. And
we should do more often, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to come on and maybe help me co-host sometime, I think that would be fabulous. That way we get both the European view and the American view of what's going on. I think I'd be pretty well balanced. So give my best to Greg, and good luck with Scout V. I know that you'll be a success there as usual. And if you ever need anything from me, let me know. And I do really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, and anytime. So just let me know when you want me, so I can bring also. You mentioned Scout V a few times, so let me go a little bit of advertisement. So we do gigs in a different way. We are not only doing the gigs in more technical way, but we also have different perspectives from, for example, from the human factor. So we have one of probably the leading research in human factors that is being taken from the aviation industry. So we do things in different way, and I would love to talk about more probably with Robin, because Robin, she's the expert in that field. So definitely we should do that.
Awesome. Why don't you talk to them and see if we can arrange an interview between the three of us and just talk solely about Scout V, because I think it's really interesting. If you get a chance, look at the platform called Jenny. So Jenny is out of London, and it's a platform that uses machine learning and AI to find cybersecurity vendors and match companies with vendors for specific needs. So it's really interesting, falls along the same type of lines maybe, and the two companies could probably learn a lot from each other. With that, I'm going to say farewell, and I'll definitely be in touch, and good luck, man.
Thanks a lot, and wish you a nice day. See you.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
See you. Cheers.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got our Predict 2022. It's our Something Old segment. This is a presentation panel discussion, actually, on the future of observability. And it features Mitch Ashley from Techstrong Research, Lodvik Bogarts from StackState, Brian Dawson from Dawson & Dawson Inc., and Cyril Leclerc from Elastic. They discuss the importance of observability in a customer-centric world. It is actually mission critical for delivering a great digital experience. So this panel of experts discusses what observability means and what it means for organizations in 2022 moving forward. It's a great discussion with a lot of insights. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hi, welcome to our observability predictions for 2022. Thank you for stopping by, spending some time with us at this conference. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I'm principal with Techstrong Research. And I am joined by some fantastic experts in observability. And we're going to be talking about several topics, thinking about 2022 and beyond. So let's get right to our topic. I'd like to introduce our panelists from three distinguished companies as well. First, let's start out with Lodewijk, who is with StackState, CTO and co-founder. Lodewijk, introduce yourself, please.
Hi there. Thanks for the invitation. So, yeah, I'm Lodewijk. I'm one of the co-founders of StackState and also the CTO. I was a software engineer before pretty much my whole life. Grew up developing software, Commodore 64 and so forth. But I also was a DevOps architect once I realized that you can ship good software to production and then still have it fail because of the infrastructure underneath. And really when that movement went into infrastructure as code, that's when I started to get interested in observability as well, or what at that time still monitoring. And we founded StackState with many of the ideas of observability, actually a little bit more comprehensive than what observability is today. And so StackState is an observability company. We're really good at root cause analysis. We track changes across time, so we can easily tell you if a problem occurs, where did that, what was the underlying change that actually caused that problem. We do that with automatic root cause analysis. We have a bunch more other stuff like autonomous anomaly detection and so forth. That's the short introduction.
Very good. Thank you so much, Lodewijk. Next, Brian Dawson. Brian Dawson is a DevOps evangelist, very well known in the space. Brian, good to be having you with us today. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. I'm glad to be with this group. And I guess to first sort of introduce myself a bit, I've been a software professional, starting as a developer for, I think, as hard as it's sort of to get out, about 30 years now. I like to say I've had a career primarily just focused on optimizing and improving software development and delivery all the way from concept to customer. While I've spent most of my time developing and delivering product, I've worked in a range of roles at a range of companies, from Sony Computer Entertainment or PlayStation as we know it, to CloudBees, to the Linux Foundation. And I'm proud of how my experience has sort of given me a panoramic perspective on what it takes to successfully deliver software, which is particularly relevant to this discussion of observability we're having today. These days, I'm focused on consulting to help people bring software development and delivery best practices to their organization.
Excellent. Couldn't think of anybody better to be doing that. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Cyril Leclerc. Cyril, if you tell us a little bit about yourself and, of course, Elastic.
Thank you very much, Mitch. So my name is Cyril Leclerc, and I am a product management lead at Elastic. I am in charge of AI Ops, alerting, and I also cover open telemetry on CI/CD observability. Before joining Elastic, I worked on CI/CD on software delivery lifecycle with Brian at CloudBees, and I was a product lead for the Jenkins offering at CloudBees. And before this, I was doing consulting. I was a developer, and I am still a developer because when my day job is finished, I love to do open source contributions, open telemetry on Jenkins at the moment. And so Elastic as a company is pretty well known for Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. We have three different solutions. We have our observability solution, and I work for this group where we do infrastructure monitoring, application monitoring, digital experience monitoring, unifying logs, metrics, traces, and now profiling as well. In addition to observability, we have a security offering. On a third, but not the least, we also have search, enterprise search capabilities. And search is connecting the dots between all our products. So that's it.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you all three for being here today and being with our audience. Well, let's jump into it. I don't know if there's been a hotter topic, a lot of hot topics in the last year or two, but certainly observability has been near at the top. Observability, tracing, SRE, all kinds of dimensions of observability, of course. I'm curious as to what are some of the drivers? Is it just, I think we're past the step of it's more than just a marketing ploy to rename our product something else and put a bunch of money behind it and convince people to buy it again. I think we're past that stage. But why has observability risen to the top as such an important issue? What are some of those drivers? Maybe Brian, if you can start us out, because I know you have a very broad and deep perspective on the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I kind of have in my mind a list. I'm sure others will cover, but I think there's just a lot of things that have kind of converged, right, to bring us to this term and practice of observability as something more, as a shift from this concept of simply logging and monitoring. But I'd say a couple of the key ones are going to be the move to the cloud. Which has, brought about a move to microservices, to pizza teams. So you have a given application or system being built from multiple services that the team that owns the application doesn't necessarily own. That's resulted in increased complexity. And then at the same time, we've moved both into kind of this iterative delivery movement and into taking on a DevOps perspective where we need to move faster, and we need to move faster while considering the entire system and supporting shared insights and collaborations between the development side and the operations side. So again, to summarize, cloud, microservices, complexity, and new modern delivery models.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, one other way of looking at that is also how dynamic environments are, and that's something that you see with cloud, but you see that also with Kubernetes. That these super dynamic environments, they need a different type of monitoring strategy, because if everything is just static, you basically plug in your instrumentation. And then, you go and you have a dashboard, and then the moment that something goes wrong, you look at your dashboard. But now that everything is constantly changing, you also have to change those plugs, and that instrumentation also needs to change. And that's what you can see indeed, like the cloud is an important driver in that, but also microservices and stuff becoming just way more dynamic is a big driver in what we see that with the observability.
I would second this on group cloud Kubernetes into the cloud native architecture, which are also microservices. These are very promising architectures, and we get a lot of hope with this. However, we see that we have a challenge when we go in production, a challenge of availability. And here what we discovered is that the established best practices to operate system are outdated and no longer work. Because, as Lodewijk said, things are ephemeral, they are designed for failures, you have chaos all the time. And so what we realize on Elastic, we are simultaneously an established company in the logs domain on a new company because we have now an integrated observability solution. We see that what used to work in the past with your logs that you were screening with your eyes, with your static dashboard, this no longer works well to operate modern platform. And we have entered a world where we talk about unknown unknowns, because outages are the combinations of multiple problems rather than in the past with a monolith just being, if I simplify, the database going down. We talk about contributing factors for root cause. And so here we need to completely reinvent the best practices on the techniques to operate the platform on the applications. And this is why we also see new tools, new companies being created. StackTech, I guess it's also the reason why you decided to enter the business. Us, Elastic, it's why we decided to launch our observability solution, to join forces with an APM company and so on. And this is what, these are the key drivers. And if we don't succeed in achieving observability to help improve the reliability of these very exciting new technologies, cloud-native technologies, then maybe the whole cloud journey, cloud-native transformation that will not succeed. And here maybe Brian has some insights on how companies face the challenges of going in production with exciting technologies, but in fact having outages and being disappointed.
Yeah, well, and I think I'll shift on where you sort of tagged me to Surreal to maybe present something back to the team, and that's it's my feeling that another change that has kind of focused attention on observability and, as you said, availability is our consumer expectations of the systems we deliver today, right? So more and more through mobile and sort of wider technology adoption, we're delivering systems to people that they expect to always be on. Right. If I need to send a bank transfer to my son at college so he could get his book on the last day of registration of class, right, I need to have a level of confidence that service is going to be up and available. So again, in my experience, I'm kind of seeing the difference between sort of monitoring of static systems with reactive response and maintaining a continual understanding of the changes of state in your system, with the goal of keeping them running and performant, is somewhat driven by consumer expectations. And Lodewijk, I'm curious, is across the journey of Stack State, have you seen that? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it from multiple angles, but it's actually kind of interesting where observability is really about it really works well on these dynamic decentralized applications, which are, of course, created because of the rising high demand requirements of consumers and so forth. Right. But then on the other hand, in order to tackle the problems that those dynamic environments then have, you need the opposite of decentralization. You need to actually centralize the data. And so when you're talking about observability, we talk about logs and metrics and traces, but really the key is in bringing those together, because before observability, we had log solutions, we had metric solution with trace solutions, and we still have all those, but the pressure is on to bring all of that together to solve some of the problems that we have in keeping those high service level objectives. To bring those to actually tackle those problems in one place instead of in 3 places or in N places.
I think that's spot on, Lodewijk, with kind of bringing that back together, right? So that you can really see across the whole system, but from one place in a very dynamic environment. Well, and that kind of fits in the topic of challenges, some of the challenges that we've had around implementing observability. Let's touch on what are some of the elements necessary for an effective observability strategy, and we can touch on some of the challenges as well. People may be coming at from a greenfield cloud native. Okay, I can kind of build this in from the beginning. Other folks may be coming from a more of a logs and metrics and tracing world, and now how do I kind of take that next step? Who wants to take a crack at defining at least a first step in what might be an element of observability strategy?
I have an interesting anecdote on this. I think some of the challenges we have in observability strategies are pretty similar to the challenges that people faced when going in a DevOps transformation or even going in an agile transformation. And there are questions of culture, of people, of process. And when we see today the thought leader in some ways of observability is the CNCF, where they have open telemetry, they have Prometheus, they have Kubernetes. a key strength of CNCF is that they have learned from the past challenges, like they have learned from OpenStack challenges and failures, and they say, thanks to what we have learned, we don't reproduce the same mistakes with Kubernetes and so on. And I think here we will see some similar question, as I said, DevOps journey or Agile, like how to measure success. And I guess it's also a question with stack state. How do I realize the value of this tool, which in fact implies the value of this change in my process, on which we see also at Elastic, like how usually a criteria is mean time to resolution of incidents. How do I reduce this so I achieve the benefit of observability? And here, with my culture of CI/CD, it relates to something that Brian is very familiar with, is how do I deploy changes with confidence? Because most of the things we see, on this is probably the DNA of stack state, is usually outages are caused by changes in the system. And so how do I measure success? Is it qualitative culture in my company? Is it quantitative culture? And this, I think, is an interesting element to have in mind, how to measure.
Yeah, I think that's...
Would you have other points?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. That's a really good point. I think, actually capturing those measurements in some type of shared document, or just actually thinking about observability and actually creating a strategy is even the first thing. We talk about observability strategies a lot, but when, like, from my own anecdotal experience, I've seen very few companies who actually are doing having an observability strategy in place. I see teams who have different observability strategies, but very few companies that actually really think about, like, where do we want to go with this, and not in, well, this is kind of what we see also, like this, the problem with that created observability, or one of the problems with all these different silos of metrics, logs, and traces. For some teams, logs are more important. For other teams, metrics are more important. And you will see, there's a measurement of decentralization where DevOps teams get to choose what they do. You build it, you run it, you pick your own tooling. And then later on, some type of reunification process happens. And an observability strategy really needs to think about, what do I want to let go and want to decentralize, and what do I want to have centralized? And then these measurements of success are definitely at the top of the list. So just even starting there, I think, will be extremely useful. And I guess that one of the key challenges that I see also is that when you look at the vendor space, you have a lot of vendors who claim observability, but some are really good at logs, some are really good at metrics, some are really good at traces, and everybody wants to do everything. But then within modern enterprises, you still see that they have many different solutions. And so really, what's the strategy around that? And that's something that I think really needs to be key in solving some of the problems that are ahead also with observability.
And I'll jump in and say, I look at about at sort of 5 points, a bit of an alliteration, right? Objectives, right? So why are we implementing it? Sort of what is the breadth of implementing? What do we look to achieve at that level? But also objectives, once the solution's implemented, what are some of the KPIs that we're globally measuring? Are we looking to improve SLA? Are we looking better to measure our performance against SLOs? Instrumentation, right? At the end of the day, kind of the richness and ability of observability solution to truly provide organizational impact is the ability to instrument across heterogeneous environments, but then to be able to do that continuously, right? As the technologies you're using are changing, your infrastructure is, as Ludovic said earlier, it's, very dynamic sort of environment on multiple dimensions. Then you need to look at infrastructure, right? We are talking again, as we mentioned earlier, this is kind of centralizing information around a very decentralized environment that will grow over time, but also will spike when it goes under load is when the system's critical. So you need to give thought to infrastructure location, infrastructure scalability, adoption, right? And I think for an observability solution to provide value, Surreal, as you said earlier, I won't go through them. There's steps to driving adoption that we follow in a DevOps transformation that are very important here. Awareness, so on and so forth. And then lastly, I'd say action. Great. We're getting all of this great data. We're even in a place where we can anticipate there's a change that may introduce risk. Are we enabled to quickly identify that and act on it? So objectives, instrumentation, infrastructure, adoption, and action would be what I say are key elements.
Yeah, I would add architecture to that list as well.
Yeah,
because you see that open telemetry, for example, is something that I think every observability strategy right now needs to mention in some form. I mean, we have to talk about what form, but making it so that all your modern applications are architected also with observability in mind really helps drive observability as a strategy forward and actually makes things possible. So yeah, I absolutely second all those points and add the architecture to the list.
The anti one.
There are two things on which I would like to contribute. One, Ludovic said, so some teams are more logs oriented, some teams are more metrics on dashboards, some teams are more metrics. And I think it's very important to understand who you are, what is your culture. Not everybody is Google. That's a risk that we have seen in many things like DevOps transformation. You are not Google. Distributed traces, they are very useful, very interesting. Usually the culture is more dev people. Yeah. On some other peoples are more dashboard. They more look at the problem globally, holistically first, and then narrow down. And you have to understand who you are to choose the best practices that will matter to you. Be careful. If you are not familiar with traces, you may get lost looking at details on being inefficient. And so here, understanding who you are to understand what are the best practices that resonate with you is very important. Something else that resonated with me, Brian talked about service level objective, which is a kind of culture. It's a transformation to operate a system based on service level objectives. We also talked about SRE transformation. Something else that we have mentioned is the idea to shift left. So maybe to involve more the dev teams, as Ludwig said, the DevOps teams, you build it, you run it. And you have to understand what you need to couple, which transformation do you need to couple with your observability journey. And the more you couple things together, the more difficult it will be to achieve any goal. I'm not sure we can completely decouple SLOs, for example, from observability, because SLOs is very helpful to achieve observability. But I am afraid if we couple too many things together, if I say 2022, I do simultaneously SRE transformation plus SLOs plus observability, embracing traces, it's way too much together. And that could be an important challenge.
Well, we have to jump into predictions. So it's predict 2022. And Ludovic, just heads up, I'm going to come to you first. So as we think about this evolution of where we are and both the adoption and also the evolution of the technology, I mean, observability has come a long, long way. You talk about open telemetry and so many other aspects of this industry. What would you say are your predictions? What do we see for the future of 2022 and beyond for observability? So Ludovic, if you would take a first crack at that.
Sure. So, I mean, I would make some generic predictions and then kind of work my way back from there. Because, one thing that you can see is the rise in dynamic applications. That's just going to rise more. Decentralization is just going to happen more. And observability really addresses the challenge there by actually centralizing the information. And by centralizing the information, information of these decentralized environments, we're now able to create some type of context, and context that before was very hard to get. And so the generic prediction is that we're going to see more context. Just going from a trace to a log to a metric, that's nice. But really what we want to be able to do is pull those service level objectives that Cyril was talking about, and those business objectives in, and actually then contextualize those with the traces, logs, and metrics. So what I still see too much is dashboards full of gauges and interesting meters and stuff. But really what you want to be able to do is, hey, my service level objective is in danger. Really you would like to know before the problem happens, so it's in danger. And then you are given the right context to be able to troubleshoot that issue or to triage the problem. And so really it's about kind of turning the tables where before in monitoring and observability, we're really talking too much about all the technical components, but really what we want to be able to do is, observe our business and then look at what technically matters to it.
And if I may, I think a good segue for that I had in mind for predictions, Mitch, is that, we start to capture and measure more dimensions, including higher order dimensions, which is Little White said is closer to the organizational objectives and SLOs. But I've also been really focused on kind of user experience, right? At the end of the day, we're humans developing systems for humans, right? And one of our measures of effectiveness are sort of behavioral attributes or how we can capture and quantify what the user experience is and start to begin more and more to sort of quantify that as a metric that we measure as we make changes, right? It can also give us some predictive view into degradation of a system, right? We're talking a lot about actually developer joy and developer delight. At the end of the day, we know, user delight, customer delight is going to be pretty key. So let's focus on that outcome. And I expect to see more of that in 2022. I also expect to see more awareness of observability solutions further left in the developer mindset. As Cyril raised plenty of times, as we look to move faster, give developers more control to continuously deploy, there's a number of practices we're leveraging. What I expect to see this year, though, amongst those practices is tightening the feedback loop, right? Giving that continuous view that observability provides to developers in the context in which they are making changes. So, let's add more intelligence to this test and production concept.
It's a really interesting idea. Yeah. Go ahead, jump in, Cyril.
So I will take another angle. We have heard questions about the future of logs. Logs is probably the main data source of observability today. And some people said logs are dead. I would challenge this. I think logs won't disappear. They will still be there and very important. However, traditional way of doing logs management is dead, as well as traditional dashboard, as Ludovic said, because we are saturated with data, it's meaningless, it's impossible to use. And what will be successful in 2022 is a new generation of consumption of logs for observability that will leverage data science, machine learning, AI ops at large, to be able to extract information, relevant information from this stream of data that used to be very efficient as its own, but now is too big to be analyzed. So this is my first prediction is AI-enabled logs management will be very important because logs are still there and we will create a new value on them. Another thing is also on metrics, on traces. The volume of data we collect is huge. These are just big data, but not good data. And we need to provide insights on this data using statistics, AI ops at large as an umbrella to be able to assist users, operators to troubleshoot. I will take something that Ludovic said earlier, root cause analysis. I think AIOps, it's not about auto-remediation. In 2022, and for some time, it will be about providing insights to operators, to our SREs, application support people, to help find the root cause or the contributing factors. So this is one of my prediction, AIOps, first on logs on globally to provide insights on the different signals and layers. Another thing for me is shift left, as Brian said, it's very important. It's very important to involve the dev team also, because if the dev team doesn't introduce in its code the right attributes to help understand the business logic that is executing inside traces, inside logs, then we don't achieve good observability. We need a meaningful message attribute in our traces. And so for this, we need to shift left. And typically, CI/CD observability is a way to shift left. Last but not least, I think observability will extend to security. We have seen with Log4j problem, we need to leverage the same observability techniques that we are building for maintaining system. We need to leverage them in the security landscape as well. So these are some of my predictions.
Well, thanks to all three of you. It's been a fantastic session. I guess I'll conclude with my first prediction is I think everyone participating, listening today, has their IQ on observability is probably raised about 10 points thanks to the three of you. So it really, truly has been a fantastic panel, and I really enjoyed your predictions as well as kind of setting the context for all of this. The one wrap-up thought I would add to it also is, we live in such an automated world that now is completely dynamic. You mentioned this, Ludovic, where nothing is the way it was the moment it happened, right? Everything has changed anywhere in the stack across the entire, technology spectrum that we're using. It is in a constant state of flux, and you have to have new technologies and new approaches like observability. So thanks to the three of you and your respective companies for joining us on this panel. We appreciate your companies sponsoring and being part of this Stack State, and of course, Brian Dawson and Elastic. Thank you to all of our audience members for joining us too. It's been our privilege to have this conversation with you. And good luck in 2022.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and see you later.
Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at the shift in engineering priorities for 2022. Nearly every aspect of the software development process is accelerating, from the increasing speed of programming languages to the expectation of faster delivery. This has resulted in a misconception that speed and efficiency should be a DevOps team's or engineers' top priority. Though agile transformations have been a central strategy for most organizations in recent years, investing in a team culture while undergoing an agile overhaul is paramount to overall success. For many workers, the pandemic caused a shift in priorities, so much so that as we begin to emerge from the events of the last 2 years, almost a quarter of workers in the UK are planning job changes, and businesses are tackling the so-called resignation. I would say that's also happening here in the United States. A desire to improve work-life balance and enjoy better benefits like flexible working has made employees more likely to leave a job. As such, maintaining employees' satisfaction and protecting team mental health should be a top priority for companies wanting to keep retention rates high. This starts with leadership, and engineering and DevOps leaders must have full transparency into their teams, with an understanding of exactly what motivates them. With this in mind, this article looks at the 3 top priorities for engineering and DevOps leaders in 2022. The short answer, throwing money at technology is not the answer. And we look at some best practices for modernizing application modernization. Leading enterprises like Netflix, Tesla, and Starbucks have proven that a microservices architecture minimizes fine-grained dependencies between services, which can then be independently tested, deployed, and scaled. And combined with DevOps best practices, this reduces technical debt and allows for modernization based on a factory model approach that incorporates automated analysis and deep observability. That said, application modernization to date has been a manual process, requiring multi-year projects that suffer high failure rate. How can we apply modern tools to improve and accelerate a company's modernization efforts? In other words, how do we make modernization more modern? This article explores how, by using automation, AI, and data science, building repeatable pipelines, and shifting architecture left, architects can get in front of technical debt before it becomes unmanageable. And in news, a recent survey from CloudBolt Software found 79% of respondents are struggling under the weight of managing multiple cloud computing environments. 3/4 of respondents said they have too many cloud tools throughout their enterprise, and a full 80% struggled to achieve comprehensive visibility into cloud usage and spending. 80% also said their current approach to cloud computing has created new security vulnerabilities. That said, 78% of respondents said that moving to the cloud has enabled them to achieve cost savings compared to running applications in on-premises IT environments. Through the survey results, CloudBolt Software is making a case for an IT framework that provides a layer of abstraction through which the management of multiple clouds and on-premises IT environments can be unified. Finding a way to manage multiple clouds, each with their own set of tools and frameworks that need to be mastered, is the core issue with multiple cloud deployments, the company believes. All right, over on Container Journal, we have an article that separates the hype from production production successes of Kubernetes. Interest in Kubernetes is reaching near ubiquity. According to the latest survey from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, 96% of organizations are either using Kubernetes or evaluating its use. However, this does not mean that Kubernetes is easy for all developers to implement. A separate study from D2IQ found that only 42% of Kubernetes projects actually make it into production, and 1 in 5 developers feel burnt out by Kubernetes. While Kubernetes awareness is at an all-time high, there is still a significant barrier to setting it up. The average time it takes to deploy a Kubernetes environment is 4.5 months. Plus, self-managed Kubernetes requires substantial ongoing maintenance, stalling the rollout of more production software. As a result, many groups have opted for cloud-managed Kubernetes, especially among teams lacking the necessary DevOps experience. This article explores some of the common challenges associated with Kubernetes adoption, which are good to consider when comparing the mainstream excitement around the technology with the real-world outcomes. And on Security Boulevard, we remain on top of the cybersecurity implications of the Russia invasion of Ukraine. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and the FBI issued a joint advisory to help organizations detect and protect their networks from cyber attacks. It recommended enabling multi-factor authentication, setting antivirus and anti-malware programs to conduct regular scans, deploying strong spam filters to prevent phishing emails from reaching end users, updating software and filtering network traffic, and more. Public and private sector partners in the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, international CERT partners, and the FBI are all working together to help organizations reduce their cybersecurity risk. This article goes deeper into the advisory, which also calls for organizations to increase vigilance for cybersecurity events and to evaluate their capabilities, which encompass planning, preparation, detection, and response. And finally, we take a look at the results of a survey by TK OpsWatt, which shows that enterprises increasingly are turning to threat hunting and malware analysis as part of their defense in-depth strategy. 48% of organizations said they have a dedicated malware analysis capability, while 58% have intermediate malware analysis competencies such as threat sandboxing. The reason less than half of organizations have dedicated malware analysis capabilities is that this work remains a highly manual process. The survey found 93% of respondents were challenged by malware analysis. These challenges stem from manual processes and a lack of automation, tool integration, and tool accuracy. This article takes a look at these survey results and others, which together show a real need for a better malware protection strategy. All right, that's it for the headlines. Please check with me on Monday when I'll be back with a brand new batch for you. Until then, I hope you have a great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Liliana Monge, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sabio Coding Bootcamp. Liliana, thank you so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're happy to have you here, especially because I really do appreciate the efforts that you guys are doing through your coding bootcamp, and really want to give you guys a little boost up, if you will, by a little bit of free promotion. But let's talk about what you guys are doing. Tell me a little bit about Sabio Coding Bootcamp.
Yeah, so we started in the fall of 2013 in Los Angeles. Back then, we had a very singular focus to make sure that the LA ecosystem was really going to be diverse. There was, Los Angeles kind of at one point in time really lived in the shadows of San Francisco, of Silicon Valley. And, I would say in 2010, 2011, things really started to get heated up. More venture capitalists started to come into the space. A lot more companies started going public, such as Cornerstone On Demand. And so we knew what was going to happen in terms of all of this amazing wealth creation and jobs. And so my partner and I, my co-founder, Gregorio, and I decided that we wanted to make sure that the ecosystem in California, in Los Angeles, was going to be diverse. So we set up a really innovative program that allows any adult who's smart and motivated to become a software developer within a very short period of time. So it's very practical training. And we were 100% dedicated to helping women, more Latinos, more Black people, people who are underrepresented in tech, like military veterans, join this innovation economy.
That's great. That's great. And I've spoken with folks in other cities who basically have the same idea to really bring up, rise up the traditionally underrepresented communities when it comes to technology. And it really surprises me how many start with these coding boot camps or these coding classes. It seems like that is kind of the cornerstone of so many IT jobs these days. So, I mean, do you see a lot of folks entering the tech space using that particular avenue, the coding, or is it, do you think that it is kind of a fundamental these days?
So I do think it's definitely fundamental, and it is a solution that can be applied pretty much throughout the United States or the world at this time, especially because we see the cost of hardware has come down significantly. That is a barrier to entry. Right, you have to kind of have your own machine, which is that needs to run beefy software, as we all know. Software engineers run quite beefy software, and so you have to start with a price point of somewhere around $1,500 to $2,000, so that every person has the equipment they need. So that can be a barrier. However, if you find a way to overcome the hardware barrier, you also have to make sure that there's reliable internet, right? Because all the information's on the internet. You're posting to AWS cloud, probably your code and things like that. So there are two barriers, but then the last component, which is curriculum and practical training to become a software engineer, I would say that is probably the most prolific. There is so much curriculum out there. So we decided to build our own custom curriculum However, there are other organizations that will lease curriculum that's available. There's also a bunch of free stuff. Vendors many times have free resources. And so it is a very wonderful solution to help any population. There's so much going on right now, like let's say in Appalachia, where the economy is changing. And so people are like, is this a possible solution? Miami's going through a massive transformation, right? They were known for hospitality, for travel, for leisure. And now it just got this massive tech injection. So you can see how you can really take a coding bootcamp and kind of pluck it anywhere. And if there is an ecosystem that's going to support it, it can definitely create an amazing tech workforce anywhere in the country.
Yeah, I find it especially in urban areas that these coding boot camps are cropping up. And I wonder if that's also kind of I don't want to call it a substitute, but maybe another avenue for especially kids coming out of high school that don't really have maybe the means to go to a four-year college. And then there are some people who don't see the value in a four-year college. They just want to do the tech school route and get a basic understanding of what they need to do, and then go out and enter the workforce. So, do you see these the important or the popularity of these coding boot camps? Do you see them as more of a kind of just a step for these especially traditional underrepresented communities, a way for them to get the resources, get the education they need without having to spend 4 years in college? Or do you see it more as they're looking at it as, I don't want to go to college, but I do want to learn a trade, and I want to, I see that there is value in coding because tech is the future. So where are you kind of seeing people joining the boot camps from?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. When we began, we thought we were going to be able to take students who graduated from high school and enroll in the program. However, we have found that 18, 19-year-olds are a little bit too young to think about, in 3 months, I'm going to be a professional. Okay. And so we will enroll people who are that young. And there's always like 1 out of 40 that are 18 or 19. However, across the country, and coding boot camps, you're right, did start in all the major metros, had their own coding boot camp. We see people who are more about 21 to about 25. So it's individuals that have some type of life experience. Maybe they've worked a little bit. Maybe they did some community college, or maybe they got a degree that didn't allow them to really participate in the economy in a meaningful way. So we've met so many music majors, so many psychology majors, even people who have, a general business degree, might have a hard time finding their footing in the economy. And so we find that people who have some type of life experience, whether you've worked in retail, and now are a little more mature, and you're really thinking about, okay, I want a career that's going to offer me a lot of opportunities. Those are really the people that we've seen across the country decide to participate in the coding bootcamp. I would venture to guess that as the space gets a little more mature, it might move a little bit younger. But right now we haven't seen a massive demand from the 18 or 19-year-olds.
Okay. So I know when you guys got started, it was really a focus on getting the underrepresented communities, the Latina community, and just addressing a need that was going to exist in the LA area. But have you seen that demographic changing with your boot camps as you've progressed? Has it been less about making sure that these traditionally underrepresented communities but it's become more of a kind of a general population that have been attending the boot camps?
Yes, definitely. So we did see that big shift. And especially, in 2020, when COVID hit, Sabio had to go into 100% live remote environment, right? So starting April and May, we really were able to enroll a person who was in Texas, a person who was in Chicago, because all you needed was your laptop and strong access to the internet. So we have seen that the demographics of our coding bootcamp have become, they're very diverse, where we will have, Latinos, African Americans, we have a massive Women in Tech scholarship. We do a lot to try to encourage ladies to come to the program and support them post-graduation. But one of the things that we weren't aware of when we started was that there's actually a large military veteran population that is very well suited for coding. And that we discovered maybe 2 or 3 years into the coding bootcamp. And so now a good percentage of the people in the program are military veterans. And so we'll have people who actually live around the world, because veterans, I don't know, have seen the world and they discover beautiful parts. And so it's become a really diverse community in a unique way that we weren't really anticipating. But what we want is basically our training room to look like America, right? And America's super diverse, super fantastic. And that's who should be participating in the innovation economy. We think everyone should give it a consideration, give it a thought, try it a little bit, and decide for themselves if it's something that they want to do professionally.
I think I love that. I think that's amazing that you guys are doing that, and it's interesting to think about. I have a 12-year-old son, and he codes every day, and he doesn't even realize that he's coding it and that he's doing coding. And we're, I'm in awe of what he's able to do on a regular basis. And it's not anything. I mean, obviously, I could learn how to code at some point, but I think we're kind of reaching this point in time where it's not really going to be a question of, do you want to learn how to code? It's just, you're going to learn how to code. It's going to be kind of ingrained, like math or English or anything like that. It's just going to be part of our everyday lives. So do you foresee in the future that you might see kind of a shift in people's attitude regarding coding and then, maybe have, as a result, maybe your curriculum is going to be shifting into maybe other areas?
Yeah, so I think there's opportunities on both sides. I mean, we've seen that, there's been a national movement for the Hour of Code, right? Mm-hmm. So in December, during Computer Science Week, most elementary kids will sit down and actively say, like, I am coding today. So they're developing that digital proficiency from an early age, which is fantastic. There are also a lot of after-school curricular activities that are related to coding and robotics. So I think that there has to be like you said, a general understanding of what code is, how it operates, have some kind of fluency in it. There are also a lot of tools that help people do low-code automation, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that development. But then there's the development on the other side of the dumbbell, which is you're going to have a lot of AI and machine learning. We're doing a lot of stuff with autonomous vehicles. I think at CNET, they showcased the tractor that's 100% autonomous, right? That the farmer is controlling just with his phone. Mm-hmm. So I think there's really exciting things that are happening across the spectrum, the technical spectrum. And so it is going to become more incumbent for people to have some type of digital literacy. And I think it just depends on how much, right? Like you and I probably, I don't know how much, like I never finished calculus. I tried it. I could never get there. And now as an adult running a business, I'm like, what even is it, right? Like who really needs it?
Right.
Versus I need algebra, you need spreadsheets, you need concepts of finance. So I think it's going to be something similar. There's going to be a big spectrum. Does that make sense? Did I answer that question?
No. It makes total sense. And, you brought up AI and machine learning and other areas where we're going to be heading. And, I was just talking to somebody earlier today about the metaverse and yes. Now that we've got these entire, universes that are being constructed virtually and people can actually interact. And it's nothing like Second Life. If anybody remembers Second Life 20 years ago, people thought that was going to be the next big thing, and that was a big bust. But the metaverse and now companies are talking about using holograms to have interactions with other people. There's so many things that are going to be coming that just are kind of mind-blowing, that we are going to need this next generation of the kids today, who they're the next generation of coders, and they're the ones who are going to create these new universes for us and all these new technologies and capabilities. So I think it's really, really amazing that they're getting this foundation now, so that they can start kind of, they don't have to think about the actual idea of coding, getting over that hurdle. They can just think about all of the possibilities that are open to them and that they can provide to their customers in the future. So good stuff there. And I love the idea that we've got these coding camps that do really give a nice foundational base to anybody, and that's an important thing, and anything that we can do to really blur the lines between equity and parity when it comes to underrepresented populations in technology, I think is a really, really good thing. So Liliana, I do want to thank you very much for what you guys are doing. I think it's a great thing. If folks are interested in finding out more about the Sabio boot camps, how can they get it? Do you have a website you want to point them to?
Yes, certainly. So it's just our name, sabio.la, because we started in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And if you go to the website, you're going to find a bunch of different resources. We have a lot of introductory courses that are absolutely free, so that people can dip their toe in the water and see, okay, is this something that might interest me? From what I've learned, a lot of people really describe getting a little bug when they write something and something happens, and they're just like, "Oh, wow!" Because I think a lot of people are, we're makers, right? We evolved to work with our hands, to have tools, and to build things. So this is one of those ways that we can really be creative and build something that other people can use, or maybe you just build a solution for yourself that you really need, that no one else has built.
All right. Well, that's such great stuff. I do appreciate it. Again, thanks for joining me today on Techstrong TV. Liliana, thanks again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. I always tell you, we've got so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Well, here are 3 that are coming up next week, and I believe the week after, in the hopes that you'll be able to mark your calendar and join us. All right, the first one is called Managing Response in the Evolving Cyber Threat Landscape. This one is happening Wednesday, March 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Everbridge. Now, digital transformation has accelerated the growth of business, but as digital capabilities expand, so do opportunities for digital systems to be compromised. And while the industry is focused heavily on monitoring and detection of cyber threats, monitoring and detection alone do not prevent compromises or downtime. It is time to plan for the unexpected attack, putting the tools and automation in place to contain and recover from an attack before it affects your business. So operational resilience is measured from the customer's experience of your service. So what will your customers experience during a cyber attack? So this webinar discusses why operational resilience is more than systems monitoring, how to recognize whether teams are ready to solve major cyber events, why cyber threat containment requires planning, and last, why automation is required for experts to respond to threats rapidly. All right, the second webinar is called How to Leverage Defense in Depth to Prepare for the Next Log4j. This one is happening Thursday, March 10th at noon on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by WhiteSource. When the Log4j vulnerability was announced in December, some companies were prepared and they completely mitigated and remediated their risk within hours of the announcement. So what can you learn from their approach, and how can you prepare for the next inevitable widespread vulnerability? This webinar focuses on how organizations can be prepared to handle the next major vulnerability announcement. So among the topics to be covered include tips for proper preparation, so know your attack surface, how to guarantee a quick reaction, so leverage your cloud controls, and the path to full remediation by leveraging application security tools such as SCA. Easy for me to say. All right, the last webinar I want to let you know about is called Integrate Security Controls Wherever You Build Applications. This one is happening Tuesday, March 15th at 9 p.m. Yes, that's p.m., folks, Eastern on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by Sneak. Secure software delivery for modern applications requires security tooling that can be integrated neatly into the iterative DevOps model. Automating security controls directly into the developer workflow to find and fix issues proactively before those workloads reach production. Sneak has partnered closely with Atlassian and AWS to build native integrations into their Atlassian Bitbucket and AWS Code Pipeline services, bridging the gap between development and security teams and empowering modern organizations to bring products to market securely without any loss in developer speed. So this webinar will demonstrate how organizations can leverage automated security controls within Atlassian Bitbucket, leverage open source vulnerability scanning within AWS Code Pipeline, continuously find and fix vulnerabilities in source control and function repos, and finally leverage deep insights and actionable remediation advice to fix security issues quickly. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me on Monday when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Please, whatever you do, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back, and rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we've got The View with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard is speaking with Kubler CTO Oleg Chunikin. They discuss, or actually he debunks, the 3 top myths around surrounding Kubernetes. This is a great topic, and it's a great conversation. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Oleg Chunikin, who's the CTO for Kubler. We're going to be talking about some of the myths surrounding Kubernetes, of which there are many. Oleg, welcome to the show.
Yeah, so I think three main myths that we discussed over time is so one of them is that Kubernetes is only container orchestration platform. So sort of narrowish view of Kubernetes itself. The first thing you think about it is, okay, I'll drop my applications into containers and run it on Kubernetes. But the rest of cross-cutting concerns will be handled somewhere else. So what we are regularly seeing in real-life implementations is that more often than not, that view has to be expanded very quickly by companies who implement this, and it probably better be ready for that from the beginning. So, and what we argue for is always to think about Kubernetes not only as a container orchestration engine, but also an infrastructure abstraction layer and a hosting platform for your, let's call it middleware. So essentially services that are not exactly your business applications, but services that provide common functionality to them, like messaging, identity management, like storage in many cases. And again, so this is not always the best scenario, but it is more and more often becomes necessary. And this view of Kubernetes as a abstraction layer that covers applications as well as infrastructure and middleware immediately gives you access into this future readiness for your architecture, if you can say so. So ability to build systems that are portable from the beginning, that immediately enable multi-cloud or hybrid, which is again more and more often a requirement. Covers a number of operational concerns for both infrastructure and middleware.
Well, let me follow up on that real quick. Do you think that, in effect, Kubernetes is emerging as a control plane that will drive convergence? So we see the convergence of not just compute and storage, but the management of the applications itself. And what are the implications does that have for the way IT teams are structured?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yes. So essentially, it's a little bit in addition to what I was talking about, because control plane of Kubernetes as a control plane enables many scenarios on top of just container orchestration, even when we are just thinking about application management, like operators for your applications, etc., etc. But if you throw in this infrastructure management and middleware management, this becomes even more productive. So because Kubernetes, yes, you're right, it's not just a control plane for a set of predefined objects. It's a great framework to build these control loops for and customize those control loops for your operational scenarios, both sort of custom for your business and more or less generic, like, again, middleware management, for example.
All right. What's the second myth? That was the first one. So if we got three, what's number two?
Yeah, very related to the first one, actually. It's about databases and stateful applications management. And again, so this is probably the most visible component of those middleware, for the lack of a better term, applications. Just think about cloud native storage. The first probably intuition about how would I manage my data when I run containerized application, well, probably I want to rely on a managed service or an appliance if I'm on premise. And then this is the best probably solution when you can limit yourself to a certain set of infrastructures. But if portability is a requirement, you immediately face with the problem of integrating those services or making them work. Well, integrating is probably the most important requirements. How would you mirror data between different environments, or how would you replicate it, backup? And Kubernetes provides great set of solutions in this area. Kubernetes, together with a number of other open source projects like Ceph and Druk, for example. Ceph, which started as this standalone storage management system, was adapted to Kubernetes and cloud native world by nice guys from Rook project, who essentially built a number of integration components and an operator for Ceph on Kubernetes. So much so that you can now, quite literally in 10 minutes, bring up a replicated mirrored storage across 2 different clouds. And on our website on Kubler, we have a webinar talking exactly about that, which safely and securely essentially sets up replicated and reliable mirroring storage with BCDR capabilities, with snapshotting, volume cloning, a pretty impressive feat.
There's really no such thing as a stateless app. People talked about stateless apps on Kubernetes all the time, but ultimately data gets stored somewhere. It's just whether it's outside or inside the cluster. Are you seeing more people store data on the cluster itself because of this convergence trend we were talking about?
Yes, exactly. So, even the stateless app where you can rely on external services for storage become not so stateless as you scale, because in many cases you will need some caches, you will need some messaging, which is not per se a persistent state of the application, but persisting that allows to optimize a lot of use cases and make it more performant. So even if you don't manage your own database, you may have to still manage some stateful components in sort of low-level sense of that. Yes, except for those rare situations where you only rely on external services for data storage, and in most cases SaaS systems. In more complicated situations, you need to provide database, or you need to provide file storage, object storage for your application. And as soon as it becomes multi-cloud or hybrid, you immediately face a problem of either picking up some single cloud managed service, or planning for the future and making sure that you would be able to move this data between different vendors. And things like Vitess or Portworx or Ceph and Druk or Kafka with Streamzy, for example, can help you with that.
All right, and what's our third myth there that we're running into these days?
I think, literally it sounds that Kubernetes continues to be increasingly complex, and you may get that impression even from our short discussion already, because we touched literally dozens of components there, which comprise modern cloud native stack. So the first impression when you look at CNCF landscape is that yes, so it's incomprehensible, and then you have to know all that to be able to build something workable. So the good news there is that this whole ecosystem relies on open standards and open approaches. And really what you need to understand is general architecture first, much fewer number of cross-cutting concerns that cloud native landscape wants to cover, like storage, for example. And Kubernetes provides those common unifying concepts for each of those concerns, like persistent volumes, persistent volume claims for storage, for block storage and file storage, or common objects and notions for ingress traffic management, etc., etc. And then you can rely on those abstracted notions, much fewer abstracted notions to easily navigate between those tools that provide specific implementations of those notions. And another aspect of this is that those tools mature over time and become much more user-friendly than they were in the past, much more ready for production deployments. So many Kubernetes management tools, Kubler is one of them, but there are many more, became a convenient and quick way not just to play with Kubernetes in your dev environment, but really deploy a production-ready environment. Same with storage, same with traffic management, same with machine learning, for example. They are much more mature and much better adapted to cloud-native infrastructure, essentially, field.
Who's managing Kubernetes these days? Is it the DevOps team, or do you see more mere mortal IT administrators, because we are providing this higher level of abstraction that makes easier to access all the bells and whistles within Kubernetes itself?
I personally like the view, this integrating view of SRE approach. So essentially, the team who is tasked with site reliability, with actual end user view of the site, and being able providing the users this service, want to be responsible for all the layers of the stack. So development team may be focusing on application development, services, requirements, etc., and to some degree for sort of first level of DevOps artifacts. But eventual responsibility goes to this SRE engineers team, or some companies call them operations teams, or sometimes it's an infrastructure management team which takes over new responsibilities. But I think this is, again, one of the benefits Kubernetes and cloud native tools provide, is that it becomes much more feasible to essentially become knowledgeable and make it possible to manage the whole stack for those teams. So they don't need to know as many separate and disconnected fields to be able to do that now. So they can rely on a number of tools that already encapsulate a number of best practice operational scenarios. And they can focus on general architecture and higher level reliability aspects.
Cool. Is this the year where we see Kubernetes get mainstream adoption? We've been talking about it now for the better part of half a decade, and organizations have been kind of rolling it out in bits and pieces, but is this the year where we might see fleets of Kubernetes clusters?
I think it is going to continue. So every year over year, we see more and more adoption. And like with any exponential growth, I think it's just the next year where we get another plus 50% or so until we get to the point of saturation. I'm not sure if this is going to the last year where we do get to that point, but I don't see it slowing down.
All right. Well, it's pretty clear that demand for expertise is exceeding the supply. So if you know Kubernetes or you can find a way to manage it easily, get yourself a raise. Hey, Oleg, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio. All right, that rounds out today's Techstrong TV broadcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversations. There are some really good ones in there. Just a quick reminder before we shut things down. Today, we have the Salt Security API Security Summit. It's happening online. You can go to techstrongevents.com to check out the agenda, lineup of speakers, and to register. If you can't get to it today, it's going to be available on demand as well. But I do encourage you to check it out today if you get a chance. We also have some live events happening starting at the end of this month. Starting March 29th, we have the first in our live shows series. They are kind of roadshow style one-day events that are going to be happening throughout the country all year long. We kick off the series with DevOps Cloud Native Live, which is happening March 29th in Atlanta, and then Cybersecurity Live, which is happening March 30th in Atlanta, and then from there we move on to DC. So you can check out the entire schedule of these live events on techstrongevents.com. See if we're coming to a town near you. We also have our InnoTech live conferences that are happening in regional areas. We've got the first one coming up, I believe, in Austin, and that one is going to be an exciting one. We've missed Austin last year, and we're excited to get back there this year. Then we've got Dallas coming up, Houston, Oklahoma City, Washington, D.C. So hopefully we'll be able to see you at one of those InnoTech conferences. We're also going to have the best of those InnoTech conferences available as a virtual event later on in the year. So you have that to look forward to. All of the information on our events, both virtual and in person, can be found at techstrongevents.com. Please do check it out. Just click on the banners, and if you want to register for any of them, you are welcome to do so right there. You'll also be able to see the speaker lineup and the agendas. That's it for me. I'm going to come back with you on Monday with a new Techstrong TV broadcast. It's pretty obvious I need a long nap this weekend. So until then, I will see you on Monday. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.